Hey, welcome back to the All Shift Podcast. Your host, Anthony Trucks. And today we have on the show Z Clarke, and she's the author of Black People Breathe. Now, if you're a person that is of color or diversity, you're going to have a lot of connections to this episode because she talks about moments where there's what's called microaggressions that take place. You know, having somebody walk up to her and be the only Black person in the business and have them go, hey, are you the new diversity hire? Like little moments like that. I've even been called things at the airport like Afro penis. Penis wasn't the word they used. You get what I'm saying. There's moments that take place that are soft and subtle and some that are very abrasive. We discuss all of those. And also some tactics and tools you can utilize, not just for yourself in terms of making sure you don't be a person that commits to microaggressions, but a person that understands how to navigate and handle those, because we live in this world where we're consistently interacting with people. And sometimes we're unaware of both how to engage with somebody properly and respectfully and or how to respond to someone who does not. And today we cover all of that. So buckle up. Tune in. Let's get to the episode. Hello, everybody. We are back. We are back to the show. Thank you for coming and hanging out with us. Today, we're going to dive in with Z Clarke because she's going to teach us a little bit about Black People Breathe, which is an interesting little conversation we'll have and all the fun things. But without further ado, welcome to the show, Z. How are you doing?
Thank you so much, Anthony. I'm doing great. Happy to be here.
Good, good. Where's home? Where are you like physically located?
I am currently physically located in Taos, New Mexico, which is a rural mountain town, and that is me finding healing in nature. So,
I
yeah.
get okay. That's crazy. My brother lives in New Mexico, but I don't know where exactly, and I know it's not for healing.
Ah,
It's a different place.
yes. Well, I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I am traditionally a city person, have lived in D.C.,
Yeah.
New York, Boston, San Francisco. So this is new, this New Mexico for me, but it is beautiful and
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
That's cool. I live in the East San Francisco Bay Area, so I definitely know the differences. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun. I love my area, but I definitely would. My wife and I were just talking about, I believe, like when my youngest kids go off to college in about 4 years, then I'm gonna end up having like a window where we like disappear and go somewhere else. We don't know where yet, but we're gonna try out some other state just to see if we can make it home for the long term. Anyways, let's say
Yes.
I'm walking around New Mexico. I sit down at this coffee shop, assuming you might go out to a coffee shop, but I don't know you. And you sit down next to me. And for some reason, you feel compelled to start talking to me. In your opinion, why should I listen to you?
You should listen to me because it depends on who you are actually. So I'll
Yeah,
say that if you are a black person, if you're a person of color, you should listen to me because I can share with you tools that can help you deal with microaggressions, that can help you deal with racism, racial profiling, and really help your mental health as you face a lot of the challenges that we face today.
mm,
But if you are an ally or aspiring ally, the reason that you should listen to me is for education around the reality of the experiences of people that look like me in this country.
I got you. It's good. It's a different side, man, because some people are going to be all for it, some are going to be against it. I mean, do you know any of my background or my story? Have you ever heard of it at all?
I mean, I know a little bit of your story, but please tell me what I should know.
Oh, just enough to make it fun conversation. I was obviously I'm a black man, but when I was born to a white woman. You know, my mom's white. My dad disappeared. I found him at 21 years old. But I was raised in foster care, and my family when I was 6 years old that I landed in and now adopted by, and it's my forever family is an all white family. So I had like an interesting dynamic of like a behind the scenes of all the nuances of life, whether it was being the only black person in an all white elementary school besides some Spanish people. And then just like having the whole nuance of like talking like this in an area in the East Bay where everybody was like, "Oh, what's up with you, Oreo?" Like, so you had those dances of back and forth, right? And to this day,
Mm.
my core friendship groups, we're for the most part, they go the longest back are all white guys. In fact, my best friend is a bald white police officer, and we for sure don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff. So I'm excited for the conversation because I want to see what I maybe inside I'm not paying attention to, and then how I can even navigate
Mm.
some of the different parts of my life better, right? So, give me background on you though, because this isn't something besides you being a
Yeah.
woman of color. Where did this become the torch? You said, you know what, I'm going to carry this.
Hmm. Well, yeah, let me share a little bit of my background since you went into your childhood and schools as well. So
Please.
I grew up in Washington, D.C., Washington, D.C., AKA the Chocolate City,
Yeah.
also known
Yeah.
as the murder capital of America during the period that I grew up there.
Mm,
And I grew up in a low income, predominantly Black neighborhood. And I went to a fancy private school in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., where I was the
mm,
only Black person in a school filled with rich white people. So
yeah.
the first time that I experienced this feeling of like, do I belong here? I'm not good enough. What is happening? And why is nobody speaking to me? And why are people treating me differently? Was when I was 8 years old on the first day of school.
Mm,
I share this with you to say that that feeling continued throughout my education. I went to Harvard for undergrad, studied economics. I went to Harvard Business School. I worked in financial services early in my career. And then after business school, went to the Bay Area where I worked in Silicon Valley in tech. And so during
mm,
that entire time of my corporate career, I would be the only woman in the room sometimes in tech, the only
yeah.
Black person in on the floor in the building, the only Black woman, one time the only Black woman at the entire company until they hired a receptionist, and then they fired the receptionist. So
Oh,
all
wow.
this to say that
Yeah.
what brought me here is the microaggressions that continue to happen in my daily life at work, and
Yeah.
the feeling like no matter how hard I tried, I would always bang my head not against the glass ceiling but the concrete ceiling. So I was
Mm,
working weekends, I was working nights, I was trying my best to get somewhere, right?
yeah.
And that caused burnout. I
Mm,
literally, I wasn't sleeping, my mental health was in the gutter. I wasn't eating, and my doctors were like, something's got to change. Your stress levels are causing your current state of being. So I
yeah.
quit and I went to India. I joke that I did the Black girl version of Eat, Pray, Love because I was
Yeah.
meditating,
Yeah.
I'm doing yoga, and I had never felt so good in my entire life. I did not know that this was possible. And so I
Yeah.
felt very passionately that I needed to share these tools with others, particularly Black people and people of color, because we have higher rates of high blood pressure. We have higher rates of heart disease, diabetes, and all sorts of things that now medical research is showing is a direct result of racism and microaggressions.
Interesting. Now, I get it, but those who may not know what it means, there's always this idea of like microaggressions, right? And I know what they are. When you've been in it, it's like you can literally rattle them off. But in your definition of someone listening is in the same wavelength of conversation for us, how would you define a
Mhm.
microaggression? And would you mind giving like a couple examples, or maybe one example that really hits it home?
Yeah. So a microaggression is a comment or action that subtly or often unconsciously or unintentionally expresses a prejudice attitude towards a member of a marginalized group.
Okay.
So, what does that mean? I'll give you an example. I remember the first day of work, somebody came up to me and said, "Are you the new diversity hire?"
Small one, yeah. That's
I
interesting
did
because it's
not
not. Yeah.
apply for that job.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah.
just I'm just
But like,
I'm just personally tired, but happen to be black. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But there are other things like when people question your competence or when you don't feel seen or heard or even mistaking you for somebody that looks nothing like you. Like I'll be in a meeting and
Yeah.
somebody will say, "Tiana, what do you think?" And I'm like, "My name is Z, but this is what I think," right? These are all
Yeah.
small things. Getting called aggressive in a performance review. Okay, so
Yeah.
other people might be called assertive, but
Yeah.
people that look like me, like us, might be called aggressive. So there are, I mean, there's a long, long list, but it's us
Mhm.
being treated differently because of what we look like.
Now what do you think that some of that is? Because there's obviously schools of thought that'll say it happens because they literally have this, a bias or racism. They're angry, or then the other side of it says, well, it's because at all they don't have much interaction with people, the culture, except for what they see on media and the portrayal there is that rough and aggressive.
Hmm.
But then you still think like someone should have common sense. Like I should have some thought of the things that come out of my mouth. How do you think that the other person's going to feel? So where do you think some of this comes from?
Hmm. I mean, I think it's a lack of empathy, to be perfectly honest. It's a lack of empathy because of just living in privilege, being born into privilege. I think a lot of people that commit microaggressions, they might have good intentions. That's why the definition of microaggression, unconsciously or unintentionally, they might have
Yeah.
good intentions, but the impact remains, just as strong and usually negative. And so
Mhm.
where does it come from? It comes from what they have learned, right? Like you learn from your parents. If you hear your parents speaking negatively about a certain group of people, then
Yeah.
you're going to believe what your parents say. And your parents learned it from their parents. And if you go back to generations, you get us to slavery, and there's that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's true. I can see that. I think that happens in my own household. I have things that me and my wife say, and then we hear our son say them. I go, he's not wrong. He just doesn't really grasp what he's saying, and that was not the setting to repeat that. Like I'm like, oh, man. Like it's like we have this thing of like effort and hard work and certain things, and we're a family that takes health as a priority. But I don't like demean other people because of their lack of attention to their health. But when we frame it, I think for him, he'll hear things and like he goes, they're just out of shape and lazy. And I go, bro, it's not what you say to that person. That's not you don't you're that's not how middle school works. That's just understand that that's said in the privacy of our home as a thing to frame it. But then I go help people, right? That's like you can't just say that. But I get it. There's sometimes things that are said in the realm. So that's the thought, right? So if we go with this idea that this is the person who lacks the empathy, but they still state these things, I think there's a deeper conversation we can have about that. But I don't think that's where your expertise is. I'd love to go, okay, great. We accept that this exists. This happens at times, whether people know it or not. But there's always this thought of like, you don't have control of people, you have control of you. So, how does somebody set themselves up to better prepare to handle these situations? Because the response that someone could be in an emotional state could be detrimental to their job, to their relationships, to their own paycheck if they get fired. Right? There's different aspects of what could be problematic based on how you respond to it. So, if we start this conversation, what do you think should be the first things we think about when these things happen to us, and then we choose to respond to them?
Well, my book is called Black People Breathe because
Hmm.
breathing is so critical to regulating our nervous system. So you see,
Hmm.
when someone makes a comment, right, and maybe it's a microaggression, or maybe it's something even more intense. Like I recently was called a fucking coon when I was on the street. I was like
I've
changing
called
figuring out a flat tire situation, and then somebody
I've
drove
been
by and said
Afro.
that to me.
That's nuts. I've had
What
the
did you
San
have?
Francisco airport. Someone called me an Afro penis without the word penis, but a better, we'll call it more vulgar word. I was like at the airport. I'm like, really at the airport? And I've been ran out, like pushed out literally off the road and learned to drive you. And we're like, damn. But there's certain ways I choose to navigate. I'm happy to share my ways, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on those because yes, those are less subtle for
Yeah.
sure.
So when these things happen, we get triggered, right? And that
Mhm.
is when our sympathetic nervous system kicks in. Our sympathetic nervous system is our fight, flight, or freeze nervous system. That is our entire being feeling like we are being attacked, like we are not safe. And when that happens, your heart rate tends to go up. You might start sweating. You might clench up. Your shoulders might come up. It all kind of just depends on how, your body reacts to that. But that is the sympathetic nervous system kicking in. And when that happens, we aren't rational people, and we might say things or do things that come from an emotionally charged place that
Mhm.
then might have negative consequences, to your point, on your job, and let's say you're in front of the police, perhaps to your life. And so my recommendation is that when you are triggered, you are intentional about breathing so that you can regulate your nervous system, so that you can calm yourself and then decide from a less triggered place what to do. And I'll just
Mhm.
share a very specific recommendation. I have many breathing techniques based on how you're feeling, but just the basic, I'm feeling triggered because someone said or did something. I invite people to try what's called the belly breath. And what that means is when you inhale, you expand your belly like a balloon, real big. And then when you exhale, you bring your belly towards your spine, right? And you repeat that inhaling, really making a big, big belly like a balloon. And see, what this does is this stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. That is your rest and digest nervous system. That's like the brakes on that gas pedal that was about to go somewhere crazy. And
Mhm.
then from a calmer place, you can decide what to say or do. So
Yeah,
that's one
I like it.
recommendation.
It is a big
Yeah.
piece. I mean, even like in health does the same, like fitness stuff too. And heart rate's up, the parasympathetic has to pop in to kind of slow and calm things down. And
Mm.
so here's the interesting thing. I think at this point in my life, since I've had it happen so often, so when a person ran me off the road, they say these things, and it's like I can actually not even, I can avoid altogether the nervous system kicking in. At this point in time, I can do it. To where like they'll do it, and I go in my head, I go, you know what? I don't feel like even having that energy in my body right now. I'm like, that person must be having a really bad day to feel the need to do that. And I don't care to have any part of their bad day trickle into mine. Because there's a statement by Gandhi or
Mm.
about Gandhi where he says, if somebody comes up and like, there's a story about someone berating him and yelling at him, and he goes, "Thank you." They go, "No, I hate you. You're so horrible." And he goes, "Thank you." And the guy gets frustrated, walks off. And someone goes to Gandhi, "How could you let that guy say it to you?" He goes, "Oh well, if someone wants to give you a present and you don't accept it, they then have to walk off with that." And so I've always
Mm.
noticed in my own life when these things happen, I just kind of smile and I go, "Okay." And I have a grin and I walk away. I'm unbothered by it, and you can see on their face the fact that it.
Mm.
And even now, like people say weird things, like things happen. I go, no, I'm just like, if that person came to me and told me, like, "Are you the diversity hire?" Like, no, I'm the dope hire. Like, for some reason, they wanted somebody better than what they got in here, so they came and hired me. Like, I'd have a part of me that would be a little bit abrasive, but there's part of me that, but I don't know if it's right, I don't know if it's wrong, but I found a way to like navigate my own life because I realized that I have to live with me, and if I let you control me by any kind of words, and I don't have control of me, and I don't have control of my home. Uh, it's and then what would be like actual responses, right? Because let's say I do that, I breathe, I have to say something, and I know
Mm.
that like I play in the NFL, and I think part of that taught me to manage very emotionally heightened situations, the crowd noise, the sound, the intensity. So I've been bathed in that, so I can navigate that. But a lot of people never have these confrontations, or they avoid them because the
Mm.
things that. So how could someone step into this if they've really never navigated stuff like this, and they'll breathe, and I get it, breathe, control, and I'm 100% agreeing to that. There's a place of control we can have there. How do I respond? Do I walk away? Like, do I state something? Do I privately sit with them and say, "Hey, this is how I felt when you say it"? Like, what are the things you think could take place in the workplace?
Mm. Yeah, well, I'll say that there is not one right answer to the question that you just asked, right? I think what
Mm,
happens is that when you breathe, you can then speak from a more calm, rational place and then decide based on the situation. And what you just shared, that you're not bothered by it, that's amazing, Anthony. I That is amazing. And I'll tell you, you are a unicorn, because the
thank
majority of people out there are not capable. Like, it's just, that's not what happens for most of us. Like, we might start cussing people out in our mind, right? And
you.
so
Yeah,
more power to you. But I grew up in Washington, D.C., where you know what I
yeah,
mean, somebody gets all up in your
yeah,
face, you naturally get all up in their face. And
yeah,
Nelson Mandela has a quote that says, resentment is like drinking poison and hoping for your enemy to die, right?
yeah.
Similar thing to the Gandhi a little bit, right? And so all this to say that, yes, somebody says something offensive, you take a deep belly breath, and then there are many, you need to first check in to see how are you feeling and what's going to be good for your mental health, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm not okay. And for my mental health, it is better for me to not engage, right? Now, maybe that's not helpful for education purposes, but you know what? I'm going to sleep better tonight because I didn't have to fight with this person at work.
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
sometimes you might want to educate, right? And I find that asking questions is a really great way to do that, right?
Interesting.
And so, for example, are you the new diversity hire? As simple as, what makes you say that? Like, right? Like
Yeah.
why what sparked that question? Like, or what,
Mhm.
what made you think that? And then that's going to force them to really
Such a-
look in the mirror. Exactly. And so, it all just kind of, right? Like something like, wow, you're so, like, how do you speak so well? And
Yeah.
so a
We
question,
get a lot.
like I don't know if you've heard that, right? A black person having grown up around a lot of white people, right? And so you
Yeah,
speak a
all
certain
the time.
way. And yeah, and so even a question like, well, how did you expect me to speak? I
Yeah.
remember I was at work, and this is a long time ago. So in the time before Zoom, when there were conference calls where you had to push in all those numbers, it's like blah 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 pound whatever.
Yeah, and the
And so
access
I
code.
had a relationship. Yes, I had a relationship with this woman, and we worked very closely together for a year, and then we met in person, and
Mhm.
she was shocked. Like, the look on her eyes, just, wow, you're Z. I didn't realize that you were pause diverse.
Oh, wow.
So, like, so the
I,
question is, well, what did you think I was going to look like? right?
Yeah.
And it
It's
just
tough.
it's not an attacking way. It's a
Mhm.
curiosity way.
Yeah.
But it all depends on whether you want to engage, right? Because then you also have to deal with them being offended. And then there's something called white women's tears, and that kind of comes real quick sometimes,
Yeah.
where then you like just a question of what did you think I was going to look like? Somehow they interpret it like you just called me a racist, and then they start crying, and it's like a whole thing. So more breathing.
Yeah, no, it's different. I 100% get it. I have had those moments. I one time was selling some on Craigslist, and I was standing outside in a red sweatshirt and like black shorts, and the guy was driving up, and he's on the phone with me, and he goes, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm the guy in red sweatshirt and black shorts." He looks right at me. I'm talking. He might have been 15 feet on the street, and I'm on the driveway. He goes, well, "I can't find you. Where are you at?" I go, "I'm the black guy that's standing there. I just don't sound like a black guy, man." But like, you kind of navigate it. I don't know. But I do understand that
Yeah.
some people do get frustrated. Now, I think because I'm a former NFL linebacker, I have a decent size. Very few people choose to get into my face, so I can understand that as being one of the reasons. But I even know when people they'll still test you when they feel safe in their cars. But I think also I have had a mastery of I guess language in a way where I can cut you deep without ever having to say a cuss word, and I will really unsettle people's
Mm,
souls. Like if I get into an argument, like on a phone call, or if I'm in a restaurant, or the little things,
mm.
I'll chop you up 17 different ways, and I'll never use a cuss word. I won't even raise my voice, but I'll make you feel like the stupidest person in the room. And so if I do choose and need a response or something's going on, like I don't get mad. I get to a point where I want to make you feel bad about your existence, and maybe it's not the safest way and smartest way to do it. I have found that it keeps me away from physical altercations. And then people all they do is just they get all spun up and they run out, they leave, they storm out. And I go, great, I'm good. And I continue with my day. But it is a practice. And unfortunately, I've had enough situations I've practiced. So it is an interesting
Mm,
dynamic to it. So take me more on the deeper dive of this book, right? Because we're talking about things that
mm.
happen a little bit there, but I really want to know, like, how does the book come into play for the wider audience of people who navigate this? Either it's from the side of wanting to be an ally and learning more about that, or from the stance of somebody navigating and dealing with these conversations.
Yeah. Well, every chapter in the book is focused on a particular issue that Black people face in America. And I
Mhm.
share this in the context of personal stories that have happened to me. And then at the end of every chapter, there are specific mindfulness and breathwork tools that you can use if and when it happens to you. So for allies, this is going to be very educational because you'll get a real life glimpse into what it's like to be Black in America, but also
Mm.
at the end, there are breathing practices that you can use when you experience anxiety, when you experience overwhelm, even though the causes of your overwhelm and anxiety are different. So let me give you an example. Like one of the chapters is called Shopping While Black. And in that chapter, I share a story of when I went to the grocery store. And actually, you said you're from the East Bay. So I
Yeah,
was in Sacramento, California at a Rayleigh's grocery store. I don't know if you've ever stopped in one of
I
those.
did. Yeah,
Um,
okay.
yeah. And so a grocery store employee called the police and said that I stole deli meat. Now, I was on a cross country road trip about to go to different national parks. My car was packed to the rim with camping gear. I spent $220 at this grocery store.
Oh
And
wow.
somebody said I stole deli meat, but I'm a vegan. So when the police came and they insisted that I stole deli meat, and they
Yeah.
searched every crevice of my car after I showed them the receipt and I explained different vegetables to them because they were very confused. What's this? I was like, that's a cucumber, an English
Yeah.
cucumber. What's this?
Mhm.
I'm like, portobello. So, like that, I explained my experience of just racial profiling and being harassed for hours because it took them hours to finally accept that there was no meat in a vegan's car. Um,
Mm.
there's a breathing technique that it was the belly breath actually that I did in that
Yeah.
moment when they are yelling at me, they're in my face. And, I hear you. You can be like, oh, I just don't let them bother me. But you know what? The police
It's
have
different.
the power to hurt you,
Yeah,
right?
it's true.
And
Hmm.
so with that in mind, it's like I share stories about, what happens, right? So another example of chapters are, and you'll like this one, you're not really Black. I don't know if you ever heard that before,
I've
but
heard it 'cause I
you're
grew up in a
not.
white family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not my name. My name has often been, not just butchered, but I have been called a new name when people didn't like my name or they couldn't pronounce it. So they just said, hey, can I just call you? Right. And they just decide. I
Mm.
have a chapter called RESPECT at Work, where I explain different microaggressions that happen to Black people, to code switch or not to code switch. And maybe because you grew up around a white family, maybe this doesn't come into your everyday. But for
Yeah.
me, having grown up in an all Black neighborhood in Washington, D.C., and then going to an
Yeah.
all white rich school, like I was code switching since I was 8 years old. And so
Yeah.
much so that it feels like a default. Like I was just like, code, like just existing in the code switch without being intentional about it. So yeah,
Mm.
those are just a few
Yeah.
chapters.
That's good. I know those ones, and it's funny as people around you who aren't, we'll call it diverse. They don't understand it. I went shopping one time, my buddy I told you about, and we went to Aldo's Shoes.
Mm-hmm.
I was running an event. I had people flying from as far as Europe to come to this event, and I had to go buy a couple of new shoes I
Mm.
wanted to get. And so I went and got some Aldos, and it was like around the Christmas. Was it Christmas time? No, no, it was like the middle of it was like the middle of the year. I want to say like around, we'll call it March, April, something like closer to the middle, because the event was going to be taking place later. Anyway, so I get these shoes and then I pull a couple out and I go, hey, can I get these in size 13? The girl, without skipping a beat, goes, you know those aren't on sale, right? That was it. You know they're not on sale, right? And I look at her and I go, I didn't even ask if they were on sale. Oh, okay. And then she just walks away. It's a little like white girl. And my buddy Jay, I look at him and I go, man, he goes, what? I go, she just in the middle of me asking, just literally told me like these aren't on sale. She goes, oh, she probably just trying to make sure because you might. It's like, no, Jay, this is what just took place. She had this assumption as a Black guy, I couldn't afford them unless they were on a sale. I'm not sure what gave that, but that's what she
Mm.
did. No, no, no. And to this day, he's like, "Someone was, man. Someone it was." So we have these conversations where like it's sometimes it's like because I think that for certain people to accept it to be real, they have to accept that like part of it was their fault, or that it was done, and like that there was something wrong. They did something wrong, and I'm trying to explain. I'm like, no one's doing anything wrong. It's just how everyone was raised, like the environment you're in. But it's at some point you have to have an awareness of the environment we're in, an awareness of how we're functioning in that,
Mm-hmm.
and be better. That's just it. Whatever better
Mm.
might be for your environment. And until we can actually at
Yeah.
least admit there's something off, we don't. So it's good that you're able to have someone have tools, because some people just aren't ready or prepared to actually navigate that just yet. And so we don't go deep into it. It's kind of an interesting thing. And so with the breathwork aspect and that kind of thing, when people get this skill and they do this, like, is it something you have to wait until these moments to utilize? I'm assuming you should and can do it at home in preparation. I think you should have it in advance, but I can see someone going
Yeah.
like, good, but like, do I gotta wait until like someone says something bad to mean to me and then I gotta start breathing? Like, how do I do this, Z?
Well, I'll just say, look, having a regular breathing practice is amazing, and I recommend that for everybody. I also know that people are just busy. Like I have so many friends that are like, Z, I can't meditate. It just doesn't work for me, right? Like it's not what I can do. And so what I'll say is, yes, having even just 5 minutes every morning of doing some deep breathing. One of the
Mhm.
practices that I love is called box breathing, which is when you inhale for a
Yeah.
count of four, you
Mm.
hold for a count of four, exhale for a count of four, hold for a count of four. It sounds like you're familiar. A lot of people are
Navy
not
SEALs.
familiar, hence me
Yeah,
explaining
SEALs
it.
do that, don't they?
But just doing a couple minutes of box breathing every morning can set a good solid foundation for your nervous system, so that when things happen, you might not be as triggered. However, what I tend to recommend for folks is it's when bad things happen that you got to remember these breathing techniques so
Yeah,
that you can
yeah.
figure them out. So yes, it's yes and is my answer
Yeah,
to you.
it's like a set point. I get that because it becomes a thing where if you don't have the practice, first at the box breathing, I learned of that from Navy SEALs. Some guys in the past had told me like it
Mm,
actually kind of gets you settled in. So when they have these heightened moments, but at the same time, they've always said you don't rise to the occasion, you fall to your training. And so I like the idea of doing
mm,
it consistently daily, because then, yeah, when these heightened moments happen, you don't just rise to the occasion and go, okay, wait, hold on, let me breathe real quick. Like, you have to have had this moment to take place in your mind, at least visualization wise, because your mind doesn't always know the
mm-hmm.
separation between like reality and perception, right? So if you put yourself in that moment,
Yeah.
breathe through it, now I can actually have some practice. So when it does become a reality, you have a little bit more control over these things. And I know you actually take this into companies now, right? Because you've since kind of
Yes.
diverted your energy. Do you mind sharing with us, I guess, the journey to doing that? Because if you're talking about these environments
Mm,
where microaggressions take place, I know there's probably a lot in the
hmm
DEI world that's happened and probably open up some doors, but I'm assuming you didn't just start doing this. What was the journey for you to kind of get into organizations and express to them like the need for this?
Yeah. So I'll say that it's through like Black employee resource groups, or Latinx employee resource groups, women's employee resource groups. But
Yeah.
basically, in my experience, DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives never felt like they were for me. They prioritize talent acquisition. So that's hire, usually from external candidate pools, right? Let's hire more Black folks. And then
Mhm.
there's implicit bias training. That's let's help the allies or aspiring allies be more aware of their biases so they are less likely to commit microaggressions. Both of these things are great. And
Mhm.
I was like, what about me, the Black person that works at your company right now? What are you doing to help me navigate the challenges that I'm in right now, and particularly around my mental health? And so I partner with employee resource groups who are usually funded by DEI, but it's a different conversation because they
Mhm.
get it. I've talked to some DEI folks that are like, our Black people are fine, right? But then you talk to the Black people that actually work there and they're like, no, we are not okay. Our stress levels are off the charts. Some of us want to
Yeah.
quit. It's a toxic environment. And so I teach workshops to empower Black and brown folks in the workplace to know how to navigate microaggressions. I teach a workshop called Mindfulness to Heal from Microaggressions at Work. I teach one on countering imposter syndrome, because if somebody's like, are you the new diversity hire? You might start to question your own value to the company. Did they only hire me because I'm Black, right? So sometimes we need an extra confidence boost, but also there's so many other issues when it comes to being Black in the workplace. For example, managing people. As a Black manager, when you have white people report to you, they often, depending on their upbringing, might not respond to your leadership and your direction the same way they might a white man. And
Mhm.
so that, and even they might not respond to feedback from you, for example, like in a performance review. And so there are different dynamics to this, or even getting the courage to ask for a promotion. Like we already know there are not that many of us in leadership positions. And so having the courage to ask for a promotion or a raise or extra responsibilities can be a lot for a Black person in the workplace. And so I teach a number of workshops around self-doubt,
Mhm.
performance, microaggressions, the glass stealing, stereotypes, even managing the need to outperform. Because you maybe didn't hear this because of your upbringing, your parents, but Black folks are like, you got to work twice as hard just to be
Mhm.
treated like everybody else. That is what any Black parent that
Yeah,
my
oh, yeah.
friends, that's what their parents told them. And so that need to outperform causes stress.
Yeah, no, I had to live in that. I mean, we grew up really poor, so I make a dumb joke that I grew up
Mm,
poor white trash. So we had to outwork anyways. Regardless of my color, I was like all the worst you can be because it was tough. But it was never
mm,
that language. But I think I learned that early on. I was really aware early on that I had to.
mm,
I stood out in class. I was going to give extra effort to get any kind of outcome. It's same thing in like areas where I had
mm,
like at one point a job. Like it is different. And what's funny is there's two ways I think that I have perceived it and I approach we'll call it the answer I would give to my efforts. On one side, I go, I can
mm,
choose to complain about the rules of the game and the way the game's being played. Right, here's the rules. Here's what's going on. I can get mad at people because I'm not having the same opportunities as my white counterparts. But I go, but you know
mm,
what? That's gonna be me waiting on someone to hand something down to me. So what if I accept the fact that I
mm,
have to work harder based on how I look? But if I can, at the end of the day, outwork you with the same rules, oh man, like I get the best of all of it because I'm stronger. I have vastly more confidence. I can outplay you. It doesn't mean I turn around and say na 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 na. I'm not making fun of you, but I think I've accepted the aspect of like I have to work harder than everybody else to get almost the same. And it doesn't give me animosity or anger. It gives me a sense of pride because I know I'm the one that'll do it. So that at a certain point where I've had success beyond a lot of people that are my white counterparts. And it's not that I'm not doing it like a I beat you out kind of thing, but I'm doing it with a way of having grace and appreciation, realizing like I could have easily sat back and just complained and tried to change them all my life or just change me. And the more I adjusted how I showed up, I have had more success. Is there a little part of me that goes, I wish it would have been easier? Yeah, it'd be nice. But that just wasn't reality.
yeah. Well, I hear you, and I don't teach people to be mad about it. Like, this is, we talk about what our current situations are.
Yeah.
And then what I share with people, you said, so then you just work harder and then you beat them at the system. What I
Yeah.
advise people to do is to not work harder, but to work smarter. Because when you work harder, meaning what I used to do, work nights, work weekends, get up super early, and burned myself out, that
Mhm.
wasn't good either. So I invite people to practice self care. And part of that is prioritizing. So you might feel the need to do all of the things, but really there's only a certain amount of time in the day, and you need to sleep, and you need to eat, and you
Mhm.
need to rest. So an example of something that I share with folks is the Eisenhower matrix. You may or may not be familiar, but it is a 2 by 2 where you put all your tasks, you have a long list of things to do. And here, so imagine like 2 columns, right? 2 by 2, urgent, not urgent, important, not
Yeah.
important. And then
Mhm.
based on where it falls, you do that now, you delegate it to somebody else, you decide when to do it later, you schedule it, or you delete it from your list if it's not urgent and not important. And I think a lot of mistakes that people make, especially Black women, where we feel like, well, we have to do everything perfectly for everyone, that's going to lead to burnout if we don't ever delete anything. And so
Sure.
by prioritizing, I also tell people to do what matters to the people that matter. So again, you have
Mhm.
a long list, but it's like, okay, of all these projects, who are the people that matter in this organization that might be able to help me, like with my career? And what is it that they care about? And I'm going to do those projects first. And some of the other things might need to fall off the list.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. I think, yeah, I definitely would have, if I went deeper on that. For me, when I say harder, it's not always just like physically randomly work harder, because that's not a recipe for success for anybody. You have to do things that
Yeah.
are smarter. But I think you have to play strategically smarter. Like, I think that's what you're saying right now. You're saying you
Yeah.
do have to strategically put your effort in ways that may be a
Yes.
little more intentional than everybody else, and kind of show up and do their thing. And like literally, like my
Mm.
son, he goes to school. He went to private school in high school. And when the whole Bitcoin thing was going on, he's just telling me, oh, yeah, this guy's dad just gave him like $1.4 million in Bitcoin for his graduation. And not to say that money is a determinant or it's a separation thing, but it is a vastly different experience for my son and his son. Like, it's just going to be a different world. His son's going to have this viewpoint of like, $1.4 million, pretty easy to come by, whereas it's not going to be the case for my son. So, and it's not just because he's black, it's really anybody, to be honest. But there's that understanding of like,
Yeah.
more strategic with it. And that's what I do tell my son. I say that there's not a problem with this kid having a life in that manner, but he's going to run into his version of hard at some point, relative to him. You don't know what
Mm.
it is, how it's going to function. But because I've taught you to do harder things at this age, when you get older, when you're in your 30s, 40s, you have a family, the things that may shut him down won't touch you. And you'll have a vastly higher
Mm.
probability of having peace of mind and success and happiness and a great
Yeah.
marriage, things that really matter in the long term, where I would say if you extrapolate, the person doesn't learn how hard it is to have something or to maintain it. When they are hit with that thing, they don't have the tools to manage it. They kind of trickle off.
Mm.
I've watched my life many times take place.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with that. And you know what that just sparked in me was a memory of my trip to Ghana. So I went to
Mhm.
Ghana last year, and I visited a lot of sites, where enslaved people were treated very poorly, as an understatement. I'm not going to go into the details. It was traumatic,
Mhm.
but I did speak to a man who said this: "You Black Americans are ashamed of the past, right? And here's the thing is that 50% of the people that went on this journey from here at that, from Ghana to everywhere else, United States and everywhere else we landed, said
Mhm.
50% of the people died. You you our ancest your ancestors were the survivors. You are the descendants of the survivors. That means that your people were the smartest, the strongest. They were courageous. They were problem solvers. They were learning how to read when they weren't allowed to learn how to read. And so there is
Mhm.
a pride that we can have around our ancestors, and that these challenges actually make us stronger, better
Yeah.
able to deal with all the things that happen. And so,
Mhm.
I used to, when I was little, when slavery came up in my all white private school, I just would like cower. I literally, people would look
Yeah.
at me. I'd
Same.
be like, don't look at me. I was ashamed.
Yeah.
But now,
Mhm.
after this experience, I am proud that my ancestors, they were the survivors.
Mhm. It's different. It 100% is different, and it's to hear it that way, and I like that framing of it too. And then there is something like there's a little bit of swag you can have, man. Black people, we're cool. There's something cool about us, like whether it's the culture, you know. I'm going to tell you something I rarely tell anybody else. But this is a podcast, and it's just what it is. So my son is 6'3". He's a good looking young black man, and I tell him, look, here's what I want you to do. I want you to have the greatest heart you can for God and dial that in. But I said, do realize this. I think the scariest thing in America is an athletic, good looking, very intelligent, well spoken black man. It's the scariest thing for a few reasons because you have the ability to play in worlds that other people can't. Like you, I can step into a world in a boardroom and be the only black person and hold my own. Not because I'm black, but just I can do it. But I do know if I take myself out of that there are a lot of people that look at me like, damn, look, this guy's he's that dude, right? But at the same time, like, put me in a football field or in a weight room or like in front of somewhere I have to operate and call it any situation that's kind of more urban. Like I can still handle myself there, and so it's in a realm of where I can step into different worlds and most people can't. I don't have to code switch. This is literally me at all times. But I've even found ways to be around like the hood dudes, like the gangsters will call it, and still talk like this and be like, hey, you can say what you want, but I played professional football. You can't get to that level of having this kind of way that you speak and carry yourself. So I'm not going to do dumb stuff and idiot. But would you want to see someone that looks like me not be able to show our young brothers how to be able to do something different? Like you can play into the realm. And so for me there, yeah, I like what you're saying. And I think part of it is the only way I got there is by working really, really hard in all areas, on my body, on my mind, and my perfection, and my skill sets, and my grammar. Like, and it's hard work in all areas. But yeah, I think that's the thing is like you're saying there's something to the ability to have these, not just the skill sets, but I think the confidence I have to be able to step into a room. It has nothing to do with anybody being less than. It's just me being the best version I can of me at all times. And I do have to navigate sometimes sucky people. It's just some people suck,
Mm.
but I don't let those sucky people bring me down to their level.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree with that. The one thing that I will add is self-care.
Yeah.
That term kind of gets thrown around a lot. And I guess I'll just explain what I mean by that. I mean, and this is maybe, I'm a mindfulness and breathwork teacher, right?
Yeah.
Mindfulness is paying attention in the present moment right now without judgment. And so particularly like paying attention to how am I feeling and what do I need, right?
Mhm.
And so yes, work hard, take care of your body, be healthy, all these things, but also just make sure that your lifestyle is conducive to the things that you need. So for
Yeah.
example, I talk a lot about morning and evening routines and making
Yeah.
sure, we talked a little bit about doing a little breathing every day, but it doesn't have to be that. It's just being intentional. What is it that's going to make me feel restored throughout my day, that's going to help me sleep well before I go to sleep at night? And
Mhm.
so it's all of the things and making sure that we take care of ourselves, whatever that means for us in the process.
I like that. That is true. It's necessary. At the end of the day, it's an individual game, man. You may be part of a team, but an individual needs to be the best part of themselves or best of them to even be functional in a great team. So I like what you're talking about. This stuff makes sense. It's fun. Two questions. First question is, where can
Mm,
someone find this book and follow more of your work?
mm. Well, the book is available. Black People Breathe. It's available wherever books are sold. So all the channels, you can find it online, available now. You can buy it now. And you can find out more about me at zclarke.com. That's ZeeClarke.com. And I have a YouTube channel where I have guided breathing practices. I offer monthly sound baths. I don't know if we mentioned this, but I'm a sound healer with Tibetan singing bowls. It's a method
That's
to get
cool.
into a very
I've heard
peaceful,
of it.
restorative state. Yeah.
Hmm. I've heard. I got a lot of friends that when I at one point in time I did the venture down that rabbit hole. I was going to Greece and different parts of Mexico and Costa Rica. Lived in Costa Rica for a little bit. I've definitely spent time with
Oh.
people doing like, smoke. They'd like to smoke, ceremonies and
Mm-hmm.
like I'm just sitting there quiet, the sound baths. I've had my fair share of experience in that kind of journey. The only thing I haven't done is plant medicine, which at some point I probably will. But
Mm.
fully grasp that whole
Mm.
world. It is cool to be able to tap into other cultures and things that they've used as tools to better themselves. It's actually very, very fun, in my opinion, as well as very, very beneficial. So thank you for
Mm.
that. Second question.
Yeah.
This is one
Yeah.
that's to do with the creator and the God. So, what promise did God or your creator make to the world when they created you?
Mm. Whew, wow. I'll tell you that what drives me, why I do what I do today, I feel like does come from God. It comes from beyond me, um,
Hmm.
and it is. I'll just. Her name is Harriet Jenkins. She was like a grandmother to me when I was growing up. And she did a lot of work with NASA.
Mm,
She helped a lot of programs to make sure that, like, the first Black person that ever went to space, right? She did a lot in her career at NASA, 20 years. And she said this to me. She said, I'm going to pass soon. She has since passed. She said, I'm going to
mm,
pass soon. And I am worried about the state of our people. I am worried when I go, who's going to help? Who's going to help us be better and feel better? And she
mhm.
said, what are you going to do? She said, what are you going to do? And I looked at her face at that time and I was like, in my head, I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I'm just trying to maintain. I'm just trying to, I'm just trying to pay my rent. I'm just trying to pay my
Yeah.
rent. But this is the promise that God made. This is why I am here, to help Black people and all people of color to feel good so that we can be our best selves in this
Mhm.
world despite the challenges.
I dig it. I like it. It's a good one. It's necessary because there are a lot of people that can a lot of help, and it could be a lot of great lives and transformational things done if people just look in and go, man, like I got something in me that's powerful if I can get it extracted out. So I appreciate you doing that to give everybody the tools to do so. It's necessary.
Mm,
That's it, everybody. Thank you so much again, Z, for hanging out with us. Thank you guys for hanging out with
yeah.
me and Z. There's definitely some things here that if you can take it and apply it, it can change your life. And if you know someone in your life that needs to hear this podcast, I say you heavily recommend it with them. Like tell them to go tune in, pay attention, because sometimes these little nuances, these little nuggets, the things that plant seeds that blossom into amazing skill sets and ways that help their life be great, all from something you share with them. So please share it. Outside of that, as always, make the most of your awe shift moments so you can make shift happen. It's Anthony Trucks and Z Clarke signing off. Hey, thank you for tuning into the Awe Shift podcast. I pray that we gave something amazing to your life. And if you found this episode served you in some way, I would love you could share it with people you know, people you love, as well as your community, because you never know who needs that simple little seed that can grow into something amazing for their life. And the actual training doesn't stop here. If you want your free copy of the show notes sent to you after every episode so you can get the major points consolidated down, simply go to textanthony.com and message the word notes. Till next time, make shift happen.